Everybody, we're here to talk about Jimmy Breslin and Gangsters, and we have with us today Denis Hamill. Denis has been a friend of mine and our family's forever. Denis is a journalist, novelist, screenwriter, and TV writer. He started at the Village Voice. He won the Meyer Berger prestigious award from Columbia University for reporting in New York City. His columns are all over the place: New York Magazine, the Los Angeles Herald, the Boston Herald, New York Newsday, and New York Daily News. Denis has been a part of New York writing forever, and we're glad to have him today. He also writes for TV and movies, and recently he's been with Law and Order SVU. Hey, Denis.
What's up?
What's happening? How are you?
How are you?
I got the whole team here.
Good.
Okay, everybody. We're here for another discussion about Breslin. And my father brought me up in probably one of the craziest ways in the world. He used to always give me notes, thoughts. He'd tell me, just be careful. Rule number one, remember this, Kevin, never perjure yourself. And I used to think to myself, Pop, what the hell are you talking about? Perjure yourselves. I'm not a bad guy. And he'd say, yeah, and just remember, don't commit the crime unless you want to do the time. And he'd start giggling. And I'd look at him thinking, Pop, I'm not a gangster. Why do you tell me this stuff? And he says, just remember, organized crime, you got two options. One, you either get handcuffed and sent to jail, or two, you get shot dead. He'd laugh to himself. He'd love telling me these stories. One day, my grandmother called the house and she said, Jimmy, my husband's brother, your father-in-law's brother, got shot dead in the driveway this morning. He got mugged. He got shot in the head. He goes, yeah? Uh-huh. She says, yeah, it was teenagers. It must have been a mugging. Yeah, uh-huh. She says, well, you got to write about it. He goes, yeah, uh-huh. He says, what am I going to write about? It was a no-good gangster who got whacked like he deserved. She started screaming at him and hung up the phone, calling him an animal. Denis, we're here to talk about my father's love affair with gangsters.
Yeah. He started it all off with the gang that couldn't shoot straight, about, mobsters in my old Brooklyn neighborhood. I mean, I grew up about a half a mile away from the Nestor Club where those guys, did all their plotting. And and from the apartment building with the courtyard where they kept the mountain lion. They used the mountain lion to collect gangster debts, or to threaten people. Your old man went and did something that no one had ever done before. He went and did the humorous part of gangsterism in America. It wasn't the menace of Al Capone and Frank Nitti and Frank Costello and all these guys. He went and did these guys that were hapless gangsters who couldn't do anything right. That's why they became gangsters. And then even as gangsters, they couldn't shoot straight. It was just hilarious. So your old man set the tone for the world to look at the gangsters in a way.
You're absolutely correct. And we're going to get into that a little bit because he brought me up with he used to give me these quotes all the time. He used to tell me, just remember, the number one cardinal rule of a thief is there's nothing too small to steal.
Yeah.
Look at him and go, Pop, I'm not a thief. Everything that he talked to me about evolved around gangsters. You'd almost think he was part of them. But he said, I'm not. I use them for writing. I use them for fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was also in neighborhood back then was gangsters would say, I only steal things that begin with an A car, a store, a bank. So, there was nothing that wasn't nailed down that they weren't involved in. And your dad showed them for what they were. It wasn't all this big, high-minded heists like Lufthansa. They would steal shirts and suits from the garment district, and anything, and every number that they could sell from the lowest earning worker. He followed them to street level. And, those guys would stand on the corner all day looking for, to see what was going to fall off the back of the truck. And there was your dad taking notes,
You are so correct. Because one time there was a crowd of guys, and we'll get into where the mythology of all this comes from, but there was a crowd of gangsters standing on a corner one day in Brooklyn. I said to Pop, were with him. He stopped in one of his coffee shops we'll get into also. And I said to him, wow, look at all those guys. What do you think they're talking about? They must be talking about something big. He looked at me, what are you, nuts? He goes, you know what they're talking about? I said, what? He goes, nothing. I go, what do you mean, nothing? He goes, you see that guy? He's telling the other guy, what's doing? And the guy says, nothing. What's doing with you? Nothing. He told me they don't have a goddamn thing on their minds.
That's exactly right. They weren't discussing Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. They were standing there figuring out how could they make money from doing nothing, as little as possible. And he had them pegged for that. You know, they were corner boys. They grew up, and they were the people who couldn't even pass civil service in a lot of, you know, so they didn't go into cops, firemen, or sanitation, or corrections department, God help us all. But they, you know, so they went in, they started selling numbers for the local wise guy. And then they got, you know, like an education system, they got promoted to different levels as they went along, you know.
He used to say, I start with a blank copy. Do you think, like, for newspapers, this was great copy? This was essential. This made everything better, easy to write. I mean, Chase, you know, it was for him for a story, or for you for a story, for that matter.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you just had to. I mean, I remember one time going into that club, the Nestor Club, one Super Bowl Sunday. They wanted me to do a Super Bowl column. I walked right into the Nestor Club on Fifth Avenue and President Street. They thought I was out of my mind that I would walk in there and ask them where they were taking action on the game, you know. But they wound up talking to me because they knew I was from the neighborhood. You know, they got a kick out of it, and they wouldn't do that to somebody that was, you know, who they thought was a Fed or something. But you if you wanted to fill the copy, a blank page, you could call up a local bookmaker. Look at how many columns your dad got out of Fats, you know, Fat Thomas. And I know a bookmaker in Brooklyn that had a doo-wop show every year in the local church in Bensonhurst. And all the cops, including Esposito, the chief of department, would come. They would sit, all the cops and politicians would sit on one side of the room, and all the gangsters were on the other. And each family, 5 families, each had a table, a big round table, and they were all there watching the platters and raising money for the church. And the priest, whose name I won't mention, he was a chaplain at NYPD, but he was also a chaplain for the local mobsters and for the Colombo family. And so he would do a cop's funeral one day and a capo's funeral the next day. And they were raising money for his church in New York. And it was like, I would go to these things, and it was, you had to bring your own food. And it was like, who could outdo whose lasagna, and who could get the biggest display of cookies. Just hilarious. And that was up to a few years ago.
It's funny you say that. My father used to say just what you said. I said, did you ever have a fear of being around these people, going around, talking to them? He telling me, you know, the only thing you should be fearful of in life as a writer? I said, what? He goes, being broke.
Yeah, that's exactly right. No, they actually liked you. They would talk to you, but, you know, don't use my real name, that kind of, you know. But they didn't mind telling stories. They loved to tell stories because they, you know, that's what they do on street corners when they, you know, when they congregate, they tell bullshit stories from, you know, from Heist Fast, you know. But he's right. I mean, if you write about gangsters, you know that the reader is going to be really amused.
I asked him, why do you like gangsters and writing about them? He said to me, I like gangsters because they're interesting. Hedge fund operators are boring. You should line up all the hedge fund operators, the smooth-faced Protestants making $30 million a year, line them up on a wall and have the mafia come in and shoot them. And you arrest the mafia for the murders, and you've eliminated all crime. Yeah.
I remember your old man saying to me, you'll never hear anybody that sounds like the Undersecretary of State in my column. You know, I mean, he was right. It all sounded like real people with area code 718 area codes in their lives. They and politicians, to him, when he wrote about them, he went behind the scenes like he did with baseball and with gangsters. So he unveiled them, he unmasked them for the crooks that they were too.
But he also said to me, you know, when I write a column, humor can win everything. And here's what's a little arrogant. That's the difference between anything I do, frankly, and anybody else. There's one accusation they can hurl, which is deadly. which is boring. If he's
Right.
boring, that's a major sin. That's a felony.
It's a personal relationship. If you don't entertain them, Jimmy knew that they came for the personality. The reason why his column was so successful is because he had a gigantic personality, and it bled through every syllable of his column. Even on his worst days, he was the best guy in town. So it was like, and we all emulated him and respected him, even when we weren't talking to him. Sometimes it was a relief not talking to him. Believe me, take it. But he was the best, and we all knew that. So.
It all started with he grew up in a neighborhood, 101st Avenue, and he was always close to gangsters. He said, "I come from Queens, which nobody in the history of New York newspapers ever wrote about or ever saw. I was reputed to be streetwise tough, which was not true. I didn't fight. I chased stories, not beatings. But I knew where to find people who were somewhat less than our civic, and so editors clung to the illusion. I grew up so close to these people, they expected me to write about them."
Right.
JB said that none of the writers paid attention to the gangsters. All they had to do was pay attention. It was there for the taking of these stories.
I think because traditionally that they would go to a mob hit and get the cops, give them the information, but nobody. Your father was the first one who would go and actually talk to them, and and I think that he had a sense from Damon Runyon that they were not just hoodlums, but they were characters. They were like colorful characters that were entertaining. They spoke their own language. They had their own vernacular. They dressed like, they tried to emulate George Raft. They actually had gangster attire, and they looked the part. And these people were comical in an odd way. And I think he captured an essence of them that nobody ever had before. They had the Untouchables vision of what gangsterism was, and your dad got a better look at them.
You are so right. And we had to live it in an odd way, meaning we'd have to drive him, or my mother wasn't feeling good. They would go every night to a place called D. Roberti's on 1st Avenue and 12th Street. My brother James was here. James, how many hours did he sit there? He did 5,000.
How many hours did I sit there? A lifetime.
He was a reporter. He sat and he looked, and he looked for the rest of the city. He was there to let the city know what happens in that underworld. He had his eye to the keyhole and shared it on the IND and the IRT every day. Everybody was reading Jimmy, and they got a glimpse of what it was like in that place. He could take a scene that looked mundane and boring or color, and then he would create this amazing tableau that people could get a sense of what that world was. And it was delivered onto the doorstep of every New Yorker every morning.
Dennis, you hit the nail on the head, because you know what he used to say? It happened that you needed no extra ability to do such a story. It was all there, like an order in a store being placed on the counter in front of you. A moron can pick it up and go home. Just write down what they do and say. But I declared that I took tremendous courage and talent to do the story.
Well, that was Jimmy's genius, though. I mean, anybody in the world could have went and interviewed the gravedigger at Kennedy's funeral. Only Jimmy thought of it. He had a unique way of seeing the world that the common person could identify with, he just stripped through all the bullshit of the normal way that journalism was taught in universities and Columbia and all. He went and he got a pad and he went from 101st Street out into his neighborhood and talked to real people. That was the genius of him. I mean, I think that. And he realized it early on that he was mining a vein in journalism that no one else had ever touched. They hadn't even prospected it. You know what I mean? He went in and he dug and he got gold, and he continued all his life. He just came at stories like the Gravedigger from angles that nobody else even thought of. And he illuminated the world with that stuff. And he brought gangsters up from the underworld into the living rooms of every New Yorker.
It's funny you say that. He used to go to a place called Rayo's, which is now big and famous. Well, this was when we were young, 16, 17, whatever, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. He would go to Rayo's. Where's Rayo's, Pop? You got to drop me off there with your mother. And East Harlem, off of Pleasant Avenue. Oh, my God. who in their right mind goes to dinner here, Pop? He goes, I'm taking Barbara Streisand there. And I used to think, okay, I didn't really think that much of Barbara Streisand at the time, but she was a big famous singer that he liked at the time, and they were friends. He'd say, I'm going there for dinner. And then we'd have to pick him up, James. So he put that place on the map, and now everybody talks about like the big shots with Rayos. Yeah. But he fell out of favor with Rayos because, just as you said, he listens, and that he should never talk around him. He was like a sponge, Dennis, and you brought that up. Rayos said to him, Jimmy, I got a problem. He said, what's the problem? He said, geez, you see outside, they dug up the whole street. There was Con Ed out there digging up the whole street. He said, the guy came and banged on my door. He said, we got a problem with your store. He said, what's the problem? He said, there's a gas line from the street tied to your store, but on our records and how we have the whole grid, there's no such thing. He said to my father, the sons of bitches, they caught us. We never paid for gas ever. We did it. We put it in when we got the place, and they got caught. And he told my father the story. And wouldn't you know it, what do you think JB did, Dennis?
I wouldn't know. What did he? You have to explain it to me. I don't know.
You know what he did? He wrote about it the next day.
Oh, yeah. Well, I figured he'd do that. Yeah.
And Rayos called him cursing, and he told him, you shouldn't have told me. I think they told him, Jimmy, go fuck yourself. You don't ever walk in here again. I think he told him, yeah, why don't you go fuck yourself? You know how crazy he was.
That's because he needed it. It was like the time that your dad was out on the ocean liner, and they were all asking him about my brother Pete dating Shirley MacLaine and Jackie Onassis at the same time. And what did he do? He wrote a column about it, did a ship to shore. He dictated it in, and Pete gets up in the morning. He's reading this story, and then Shirley is pissed off, but Jackie Onassis thought it was hilarious. Pete said, I can't believe that Jimmy did this to me. And he came home. He said, Jimmy, why did you do this? He said, I needed it. I needed a column. That was it. If he had it, Jimmy wrote about it.
I asked him about that, and I said, Pop, did you ever worry about that? And you know what he told me? Most people want to have their names in newspapers. So they treat you like you're important. What interests you about them? Because they're interesting. That it's a way of life. It's bad. You're never supposed to extol or glamorize it like they did in The Godfather. I always thought that was a terrible thing. He said, I'd like making fun of them. You're supposed to write about them. You can't ignore them. They're part of life in the city forever.
That's right. That's right.
Now, it's funny, Dennis, but JB almost taught a master class in Gangsters. And he told me, even he wrote it in The Good Rat, he goes, here's the reasons you want to be a gangster. And I said, what are they, Pop? He goes, 1 through 10. You don't want to ever go to work.
Yeah.
Number 11, you want to be known. Number 12, broads, AKA women. 13, big new cars. 14, stay out all night. 15, he goes, and this is remarkable, killing is fun. 16, you hated your father. And 17, he told me a big one, trouble reading and writing.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll leave it with this before we get a little bit more serious there. But he used to tell me, and he had a great line, I think it was in I Don't Want to Go to Jail, his other book about gangsters, because he wrote, The Guy That Couldn't Shoot Straight, The Good Rat, I Don't Want to Go to Jail. So many columns, hundreds and hundreds of columns about gangsters, but his love for gangsters, from Fat Tony Salerno to Gigante the Chin. Fat Tony used to tell him, Jimmy, you look like a bum. And he gave him a card. He said, you're embarrassing me that I even know you, Jimmy. Go to a tailor and get a suit. You look like a slob. But he always did the legwork, always going around.
Yeah,
of course,
without a doubt.
He got a phone call about Galante from one of the detectives. Why was Breslin always first on the scene? Okay, in his office, he had a picture of Galante with the cigar clenched in his teeth, dead as a doornail, on Forest Avenue, I believe, or whichever, Wilson Avenue. He got the call. He raced there. Detective told him, Jimmy, go next door. Go upstairs. We got a lady. You go down the fire escape. Well, the guy driving my father took him. They go. It was 100 degrees. JB, he's not a kid anymore. He goes next door. He goes upstairs, bangs on the door. A Puerto Rican lady opens the door. A pit bull almost attacks him. They're holding the dog back so JB can get by him. JB goes to the fire escape, goes down, and he's the only guy in that courtyard looking at him with the news photographer. And I think the photographer said, Jimmy, you get this shot. And we had that in our house. And he had Tony Salerno always there. And when Tony went to jail, he used to go visit him in jail all the time and bring cigars. JB genuinely admired him as a person.
He made them fun. A lot of people wound up loving Gangsters because of your dad. I mean, that looked at that world in a whole new way anyway.
He might have made it intoxicating because he said, well, in The Good Rat, he had this great quote. He said, there is nothing like being in the mafia at sundown. You get all the money you need, custom clothes, a big new car, jewelry, the finest women. You stay out all night. Then they put the bracelets on.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They knew that was part of it, though, Kevin, until Rico. Because then, they would put the bracelets on and do, like I said before, 5, maybe 10 years. But when they said life, that's when they'd flip. That's when they broke the back of the mob.
But you're right. In organized crime, now we get into the serious part. There's where drugs and racketeering came in. And he told me as soon as heroin came in, he wrote about Inuccio, his character, that quote, did he make up or not? He used it in 20 columns in the newspaper. He made up the mobster, the old man, the boss of bosses. He made up an address. We used to go to Pleasant Avenue. He used to say, can we see where Inuccio is? Yeah, he's busy. I didn't even know if my father invented some of these characters. I used to wonder because he would never give it up. He'd smile, look out into the air and laugh to himself. I mean, he almost had like his own romantic thing going with these guys. It was a guys and dolls thing. And I don't think
it was Damon Runyon. Yeah, it was some of that. That's why he did a book on Damon Runyon.
But you're right. All of a sudden, he told me it's over one day. I can't have fun with Inuccio. I can't have fun with Fat Thomas, anybody anymore. And I said, why, Pop? He said to me, drugs, heroin.
Yeah. That happened in the 80s when the wise guys themselves started getting high. When they all started sniffing coke and then even doing crack and getting and they got sloppy and they needed to sell drugs to maintain their own habits. A lot of those young wise guys were really fucked up on drugs themselves. And so I think that really damaged the whole organization because they couldn't trust them. You can't trust a junkie. So it was like, I think it changed the mob in a big, big way,
This episode of Breslin's What's Doing is brought to you by Medford Fast Lube. Put your car in good hands. With more than 25 years of experience, the experts at Medford Fast Lube will care for your vehicle like it's our own without breaking the bank. Take the stress out of the unexpected. If your car needs repair, it can be expensive as well as stressful. Take some of that weight off your shoulders with free estimates from the experts at Medford Fast Lube. Our friendly staff is here to help. Located at Route 112 in Medford, New York. www.medfordfastlube.com or dial 631-475-2107. Medford Fast Lube. Advisor Insurance Group. Advisor Insurance resource experts in life, disability, long-term care, business, home, and auto insurance across the U.S. With over 60 insurance companies offered and over 30 years of combined experience, Advisor Insurance Resource simply can't be beat. Call 866-942-4181 or on the web at advisorinsuranceresource.com. Bamonte's. Bamonte's at 32 Withers Street, Brooklyn, New York, is a family-owned and operated Italian-American restaurant that has been in business since 1900. It is the oldest Italian restaurant in Brooklyn and one of the oldest in New York City. Once again, try our delicious food at 32 Withers Street, Brooklyn, or call 718-384-8831. Bamonte's.
The other big guy in all of this is Gotti. Do you think that the media killed him? Newspapers killed him? Because my father
I think he gave himself to the media. He got dressed and shaved for it every single day. He walked in front of cameras. He hung out in places like Columbus. He went to night spots. He wasn't exactly shy. He wasn't really sitting just in the Raven night. He went out and partied and went to the fancy restaurants. It was a big difference between him and a guy like Quiet Tom. What you're doing when you do that is you're asking the feds, you're defying them. Said, come and get me. And they did.
My father said that he was fantastic because he said, my years in the newspaper business, the mafia comes down to one thing, circulation.
Yeah, there you go.
he was in court one day with Gotti, and there was a break. And the attorneys were there, Cutler, and I think the attorney you mentioned, the other, I forget the other attorney, but
P. Hayes.
and the jurors are sitting there, and my father's saying hello to Gotti, and they're just, I don't know, just shooting the breeze. You know, his court days can get long. And all of a sudden, the guy in the witness chair goes, "I wouldn't worry about him. You got your own problems." My father looks at Gotti. Gotti looks at my father. They look at the guy. The guy goes, "I'm not talking about him, Gotti. I'm talking about you, Breslin." Father looks at him. He goes, "I know your son, and he's no good." Gotti started cracking up to my father, saying, "See, you got the same problems as I got." The guy goes in the courtroom. "I was your son's math teacher, and he's no good."
Who was he talking about? You?
My father came home and goes to me, "I got to talk to you." "Did you have a math teacher?" He goes, a fat guy, something Leeds or something. I go, "Yeah, Mr. Leeds." I said, "That's the guy that got a D and a C pop I could never pass." He goes, "He's out of his fucking mind." I said, "Bob, see, I told you the guy was crazy." He goes, "You know what the idiot did in court?" And he told me, and I just shook my head. Well, let's go back to one thing, because the whole essence of this was my father always had fun with these guys. And I think he always realized it was conversations. He didn't try to glorify them as much as show that they're a part of American folklore.
Yeah. He chronicled them. I mean, I don't think he ever expressed opinions about them in any way. He just lay out the actual lifestyle and the dialogue and the things that they do. All you had to do was report it and leave it to the reader to make his or her own conclusions about them. But I think your dad's, it was just laying it out. He would bring it into the newspaper, and therefore the city of New York got to eavesdrop on these people and to watch who they were.
He'd go to me, "Who else? Who are you going to glorify? You want to make a big movie? What are we going to make one on Warren Buffett?"
Yeah, he's absolutely right. I mean, he's absolutely right. And
he was with Al Pacino, and he liked Al, and he liked Bobby. Of course, he said Bobby and Al are the two greatest American actors. He'd take them over Olivier any day. But he'd tell me he was with Al, and Al said, "Jimmy, I played Michael in The Godfather, and I'm Michael forever."
That's right. He's right.
All right, I think we had a little fun here.
Like a Breslin column, when you got done with a Breslin column, you went away smiling, or you were outraged, one or the other. It's, but this was fun.